And so without further ado, I would love to invite onto the stage the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Greece, George Gerapetritis. Please come and join us, Minister. A popular fella. Come along. And see if he gets the same applause. Martin Schulz, former President of the European Parliament and Chair of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation. They're all very polite. Excellent. Well, it's great to have you both here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Minister, we're all smiling, but we're in a difficult period in world affairs.
We have to smile nevertheless, though.
Indeed, indeed, and I welcome the smiles. But let's hear from you. Your thoughts, please, on the subjects that we're looking at tonight.
It could take hours to discuss about the subjects because they're very open-ended. So I would like to make just some introductory notes, remarks, in order to give some food for thought. The truth is that when I was trying to elaborate upon the issues last week, it was a completely different speech because, you know, things are moving so rapidly that it becomes completely outdated in like a couple of days. So the problem now is that there is no predictability in anything. And this has, I think, changed completely the job of any politician and especially the job of a foreign minister, because instead of trying to foresee what is going to happen, to predict the future, which is completely out of question, what you have to do is just to try and come up with all alternative scenarios in order to be able to address the delicacies and the sensitivities coming up. So that's why I have no notes. I would like to make a few points. The first is that I'm thrilled to be in Thessaloniki because this is the city which reflects history, diversity, power in diversity, and you can see this here in this room because it's a very colorful mix of people coming from all corners of Europe and of the world, and it's really important to be in that place. I am delighted, secondly, because I will be with Martin Schulz. I couldn't expect a better interlocutor to discuss with, and I'm really honored to be here. Martin Schulz is probably one of the top 5 pro-European, pro-federalists, all around Europe. And he was a firm supporter of Europe and Greece during the very tough decade from 2010, and especially when he took over the presidency of the European Parliament from it was 12 to 17, right? 5 years. It was probably the most difficult period for Europe altogether. Obviously, it was the most difficult period for Greece, but it was also the most difficult period for Europe because I think what we had to show back then was the solidarity that we needed, the sustainability of Europe, the autonomy of Europe, and above all, we have to demonstrate to the world and to ourselves that we are united. And I think Martin Schulz was a key figure in showing this unity, and I think we're all here in Greece hugely indebted to him for his support. I am not sure that we're going to eventually end in United States of Europe, as Martin would say a decade ago. What I have to say is that we have to reinvent Europe, and probably we have to try and revisit the basic premises upon which Europe has been established. What I'm saying is that Europe is now in a crossroad, and I think there is a major fork on the road now. We need to take some very strong decisions. We have to be very powerful because ahead we have some very difficult choices to make. I would like to make a very strong statement. I think Europe, as well as the international security architecture, has failed in responding with contemporary challenges. We have not succeeded in having a very powerful a very meaningful attitude towards the two wars we have in our neighborhood. We haven't made it to actually articulate a single voice against aggression, and especially the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We're still discussing about how to make it possible to stop the hostilities in Middle East, and we're just praising in order to halt the domino effect, the spillover of hostilities in the broader region. We haven't made it to be as strong and as meaningful as we would like to be. This, I think, has to do with two basic grounds. The first is that the process of decision-making within Europe is not always the most rational. If anyone, and I can see quite a few people who have been in European Union councils, if you just participate in one council, you do understand how difficult it is to actually reach a decision. You may agree on the basics, you may agree on the root causes which produce adverse effects, but you cannot actually reach unanimity when it comes to actual tangible results. We may discuss within European councils for hours for just a word or two or a phrase, but eventually we cannot reach a meaningful conclusion. I think the Middle East situation is very evident. Why? Because we all agree in Europe about what we should do and about the end results. We all agree that hostilities should stop. We all agree that hostages should be released, and it was an appalling and dreadful picture of what we see a couple of days ago with the 6 dead hostages. We all agree that we should end up in forming a new Palestine state, yet we cannot come up with some vehicles in order to achieve it. Sometimes we sacrifice the substance for processes, and this is something that it's not akin to Europe. The second reason why sometimes we fail to reach some sort of a meaningful result is because Europe has not as yet received the level of strategic autonomy that we need to achieve. I think the next parliament is going to be absolutely crucial, and it's of utmost importance. I think that the new members of the European Parliament, and of course the new commissioners, Apostolos is going to be among them, and he's not going to have an easy job by any means. The truth is that there are some challenges that have never been in the past, at least in that type of urgency. Competitiveness, agriculture, defense, they're all very acute. They need to be addressed in the very near future, and we have to be united. And this is something that we have to address earlier than later. What I see, and I can see it in my capacity as foreign minister, but also in my academic capacity, is that we're moving very rapidly towards a geopolitical Europe. But we haven't as yet decided about the mainstays of how we achieve this geopolitical Europe. Europe needs to be geopolitical. There is no option in this, because Europe has to address the war in Ukraine. Europe has to address what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. In the very near future, we're going to address huge problems concerning Africa. If someone just sees what is happening now in Africa, I think they would be scared to death. It's a dreadful situation. Especially in the Sahel region, in sub-Saharan Africa, you can see only authoritarian regimes, you can see civil wars, you can see starvation, you can see huge problems of decency. And I think we're not dealing with those issues. And at some point, we have to decide what type of future we need for ourselves and for the future generations. We need to develop some modern modules of sustainability. Sustainability is going to be the key word, I think, for the future, not only for the environment, but also for all aspects of human life. We have to see how we reduce the inequalities. We're suffering from a high level of inequality. Convergence is not an easy thing. We all know that there are some divergences in Europe and around the world, but divergences are getting bigger and bigger, and we haven't as yet found the proper modules in order to combat those inequalities. So we need to be much more decisive if we want to survive as Europeans. I will conclude because I know that it's obviously better to discuss instead of having monologues. What I have to say is that the political scenery around the world is not very promising or thrilling. I'm not saying about the American elections, which is going to be a cornerstone for the future, because we all understand that without the support of the United States, without strong links between Europe and the United States and NATO, we're not going to have a very strong defense against authoritarianism. What I'm saying is that we need to develop basic principles when it comes to foreign policy. We need to share some common beliefs. We have to develop a common mindset when it comes to basic values. And I think this is important. I'm saying that I can see, and indeed I'm quite concerned with this, we were discussing with Martin about it, the rise of extreme political parties. I can see again the rise of populism, especially in Europe. The results of the German regional elections in Länder were not the best. We can see that there is a very strong, not alliance, but there is a very strong partnership between far right and far left. We see a mutation of far left towards a more populist agenda. We couldn't imagine that a far left party could be anti-migration or could be pro-Russian or any other sort of that type of agenda, but we see it. And we have to stand together when it comes to the rise of the political extremities. We have to serve the moderate political speech, and we have to share common values. So we need to be here, and we need to be together, and we need to be active. In a world which is moving so rapidly, in a world that changes every day, if you stay inactive, this is by definition a setback. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you said it would be a challenge to get through everything in 10 minutes, but you did admirably, I think.
Thank you.
I heard a certain amount of aspirational thinking, a certain amount of, if I may say, wishful thinking. Mr. Schulz, is Europe equipped? Is it set up in such a way that it can achieve half of what the minister's been talking about?
I would be totally satisfied with half, even with a quarter.
Of course.
Before answering to your question, first of all, thank you very much, Minister, for your nice words about me. I found it good. Thank you very much. The introduction of your analysis touched on a point I want to pick up. We are living in changing times, quite clear. But the change is from the early morning to the late night. You as a journalist, you know it. The news of 6 o'clock in the morning is history at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The social networks, the mediatic world in which we are living leads to, for politicians, for businessmen, for journalists, for everybody at the end, but for decision makers, for responsible people like a governor in a region and the future commissioner in Brussels knows it as a member of parliament, a minister, or a head of a newspaper. The social networks, our digital world is creating every day higher pressure on decision makers. And the expectation of citizens is they must find a solution now. The problem arrives in the morning. Millions and millions of commentaries are making proposals that creates the feeling there are ways to solve the problems, only these politicians are unable to do it. This is the reality of everybody in political life. The pressure to deliver solutions, even for problems arising now, in the next 2 hours, is the expectation, but it is impossible. We are living in a period of acceleration, every day more. And with a new technology, artificial intelligence, we will face even higher challenges, more difficulties. Why I'm mentioning this? Acceleration is what is the most difficult thing in my life today. But as a Democrat, I must admit, democracy is a slow system. In democracy, everybody has the right to participate. Everybody has the right to be heard. Everybody has the right to participate in decision making. In a parliament, every member of a parliament has the right to contribute. The political groups, the opposition must be heard, the government must explain, a compromise must be found. Not in Greece, you have an absolute majority, clear. But if you have a coalition government like we have in Germany, it needs time. And if we want participation, if we want to involve citizens in the decision making, because our experience is as nearer the decision making happens to the citizens, as higher is the acceptance. As far away a decision making is from the citizens, as lower is the acceptance. One of the biggest problems of the European Union, that people think I have no influence, I'm not involved, they are not discussing about me in Brussels, far away.
Distance.
That distance. So we have to involve everybody, but then we need time. And this is the contradiction of our period. The acceleration on one hand, and the need of time of democracy on the other side. And this is, for the time being, creating a political vacuum, a societal vacuum. And this vacuum is filled by all the extremists from right wing or left wing, who have for everything a solution, a simple one. In my country, the right wing extremists, they have a solution, migrants. Migration is the mother of all problems. Which is, by the way, very, very dangerous in my country. It's German ambassador is present here. I'm deeply concerned that the 1st of September, which is the day of the beginning of the Second World War, committed by the Hitler Nazi regime, in a part of our country, a right-wing extremist party, with a leader who speaks literally about a new commemoration strategy we need in Germany, who calls the field of commemoration in the center of Berlin for the 6 million killed Jews a monument of disgrace. He won that election. So I'm worried, because this is dangerous if you reduce the complexity of problems to one single problem, causing all the following problems. This is not admissible because it is not true, and it is dangerous if it is against the minority. And this is a fascist strategy all over in Europe. They identify a minority, and then it happens like this. We have the problems because these people are there. If they would not be here, we wouldn't have the problems. Therefore, they have to disappear, and then the problems will be solved. This sounds to the past of the 20th century. Therefore, we need a kind of, I have no proposal for it, but first of all, we have to make that point. Acceleration in our digital world on one hand is for the time being a threat for democracy. That means that Democrats all over in the world must think how to solve that problem. My feeling is with the instruments of the digital world, we can involve much more people in the decision making as we do it today. Traditional political parties like your party here or my party in Germany, the democratic center parties, the democratic left parties, the democratic right parties must consider how we can introduce in this digital world our messages with simple words but more differentiated than the right or left-wing extremists do it for the time being. In the 21st century, let's be honest, even a country like Germany alone is lost. We need Europe more than ever. I give you a figure. Germany has 82 million inhabitants. We have 82 million citizens, the biggest member state of the European Union. This is a middle-sized Chinese province. China has 1.4 billion citizens. India, the same. These two neighbor countries have 2.8 billion people. Greece has 11 million citizens. Governor, commissioner in Spain, forgive me, but 11 million people is half of the capital of China. Beijing has 22 million inhabitants. If we want to survive in the 21st century, it will not happen on the level Austria on one hand and China on the other side. I know the Austrians, they believe it is the other way around, but will not happen. The Inflation Reduction Act of the United States of America was not anti-European, but not in favor of Europe. Ordered and decided by a pro-transatlantic president. What will happen if this shameful person should be re-elected president of the United States? I don't want to imagine. Therefore, from the bottom of my heart, I hope that Kamala Harris will win the election in the United States. That's for us Europeans, for sure, better. But it will not solve one problem. The European countries alone, all of them, Greece like Germany, Malta like Finland, Sweden like Austria, Belgium like Italy, alone is in the economic competition of the 21st century. And this is the decisive one. The Economist writes every day about it. Too weak. If we are united, we are strong enough. Because our shared economy, our single market, is still the target for all of them. The Chinese want to export their goods to the single market of the European Union. The Americans as well. But the European Union should not admit and not allow, Commissioner, this is my recommendation to you in the future Commission, is that unfair competition, for example, with subsidies paid by the United States of America to their companies, corresponds with a competition policy within a competitiveness strategy within the European Union, which is forbidden for member states to subvent their own companies as a violation of our internal competition rules. But in the same time, we keep our market open for goods from those countries who give subsidies to their companies. This is an illoyal competition allowed by the European Union. I argued during my time as President of the European Parliament always for, and I was very disappointed of my own political family, for trade agreements. My own political family was against trade agreements because they considered this as to submit the European Union under the rules of the American capitalists. That was wrong. Because within a trade agreement, you can include minimal social standards, minimal environment standards, minimal respect for the transformation rules of the green transformation, green transition we need in the world. Because if in a competition, let's take a Chinese company, the lowest social standard, the lowest environment standard, the lowest salary standards corresponds with our guarantee of minimal salaries, our respect for environmental standards, for our right of strike for workers, trade union rights, etc., social security, etc., then quite clear European companies are less competitive than companies from these countries. This could, in trade agreements, be corrected if the member states of the European Union stick together and combine the existing single market with a political common strategy. And therefore, I'm always advocating for enlargement. How to making pathways to prosperity, solidity and cohesion for Southeast Europe is to build the European Union in that way and to include Southeast European countries, not yet a member of the European Union, within that European Union, at least within the European single market, before perhaps joining the Union as a full member, because I take another point, your description of the discussions within the European Council, if 27 are added on the same rules with 33, that will even be worse than it did already today. But we should not argue, first we have to reform and then they can join. We must find a way to include them in those parts of the European cooperation which increase prosperity, solidity and cohesion for these countries as a step of development to join then a later reformed European Union. This is my view since a very long time. And I want to conclude with one closing observation. The sovereignty of a state, the national state as the frame existing to protect the interests of the citizens, is a European invention. This was invented in Europe. The time of enlightenment in the 18th century, repartition of power was a proposal of a French philosopher, Montesquieu, was developed with a lot of fights for democracy, and after the Second World War, endorsed in more or less all Western European and later then Eastern European countries. This is a European thing. It is European history. My country, my nation, my sovereignty, our culture. But I know this is very difficult to understand and to accept. I have nothing against German culture, against Bavarian culture. I have nothing against Austrian music. I have nothing against Verdi, and I like Beethoven. And Albrecht Dürer was a wonderful German painter, and Sibelius, a wonderful Finnish composer. European culture is heterogeneous and wonderful, but for Beethoven and Mozart, my grandchildren will not get jobs. What we need is not to stick to our past, neither the cultural past nor the political past. What we have to be is courageous and doing steps for the future, and therefore I argue for the United States of Europe. That will not be a kind of United States of America on European soil. I can't transform a Greek in a Californian or a German in a Texanian. It's impossible. We need our identity. But our identity is not enough to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Two excellent interventions from both of you. I'm very grateful to you for those. I still hear, I mean, it's what I would expect to hear, but I do hear a lot of how we would like things to be. I have to look at things as they are, and my question really, my first question comes down to that. While in this room and on this stage, we talk about the importance of cohesion, the importance of agreement, there is, I think, very clearly a battle underway in the heart of European politics between the liberal and the illiberal visions of where Europe should go. So the illiberal vision that we see, that people are spelling out among the populism around the continent, isn't simply a reaction to the kinds of proposals that you two gentlemen are making. It's espousal of an alternative vision, an alternative way of looking at Europe. So what I'd like to ask both of you briefly to reflect on and comment on is how this confrontation can be resolved, how it will be resolved, where you expect it to settle. You talked about the founding principles of Europe. What are they, and how can they be matched in the current division, the polarization of European politics? Mr. Schulz first.
That's a difficult question. I would prefer that the minister makes some proposals for it. The European Union will not survive if only one country or a group of countries with the same political view, the only, let's take those who stick to the liberal democracy, ignore that those who think illiberal democracy is better, whatever it means. For me, illiberal democracy is excluding each other. Democracy is liberal. But let's be precise. Orban is there. He has a majority in his country. He's supported by a majority of his people. And you have to live with the government in the council. Perhaps in a foreseeable time, we will have in Austria Kikel as a chancellor, who is even more radical than Orban. We had Babiš in the Czech Republic, and even Giorgia Meloni is from another point of view than Olaf Scholz or Mitsotakis. The European Union is based on the principle of compromise. And at the end, Minister, I'm looking to the outcomes of the Council. There is, at the end, always a compromise. Therefore, my feeling is we need more bridge builders. My expectation from the Commission was that the Commission takes that position as a mediator. Sovereign countries are sovereign countries, and the Prime Minister of Hungary, for example, to survive in Hungary politically, the best instrument is to attack Brussels. Behind closed doors, it is about money, he tells to him, yeah, you know, this is election campaign. But at the end, I saw that Orban agreed about the measures against Russia with all the measures at the end. I would suggest to the Commissioner, to suggest the President of the Commission, she is not listening to me, but perhaps to you, to urge the Commission more to try to use the communitarian instruments, not to create the feeling you must submit you under the rule of Brussels, but to combine a reasonable approach with ideological speeches. This is, for the time being, in my eyes, the best way in Europe. I take an example where it is successful. Giorgia Meloni considered Mussolini as the biggest statesman of the 20th century. She is elected on the basis of a program against the European Union. But she is reasonable enough to know that Italy needs more than all the other three G7 countries, oh no, two, Germany and France, the European Union. Therefore, in Brussels, you can make a compromise with her. This is, in my eyes, first of all, not the task of another government. It is the task of a commission. Another example, because we are here in Greece. During my time as President of the European Parliament, or as Chairman of the Social Democratic Group in the European Parliament, I faced the following development. Barroso was the Commission President and later then Juncker. With Juncker it changed a little bit, but as long as Barroso was the President of the Commission, he allowed, as President of the Commission, that the President, no, not the President, that the strongest Minister of Finance in the Eurogroup, the German Minister of Finance, decided about the strategy concerning the Greece financial crisis. It was especially Wolfgang Schäuble. I witnessed that everybody looked to Schäuble and Schäuble said so, okay, it was clear, but he said so, no. That created a feeling, the feeling that the Greeks were ruled in Berlin. Therefore, I think the Commission must play in times of such an ideological confrontation the role of a mediator, and I hope that the next Commission will do it.
Thank you very much. Minister.
How much time do we have?
You've got 4 minutes to answer this question, so I can ask you 2 or 3 more awkward ones.
Okay, 4 minutes. This is a titanic work. Okay, I think there is an institutional aspect and there is a political psychological aspect. The institutional aspect is, connotes the idea that we need to revisit the decision-making process. We have seen that on many occasions the idea of veto players hasn't worked, hasn't performed. So we need to find some more even out-of-the-box ideas in order to try and set up decision-making processes that are effective and meaningful in order to be able to achieve the eventual decisions. Because I can see that from a historical point of view, I can see the point in having the idea of unanimity in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, but I really seriously doubt it whether today this is the type of decision-making that could eventually result in some rational choices. The second is the political psychological, and I think it's a matter of mindset. Obviously, Martin Schulz has a lot to say about the political attitudes and the behavioral models. What I need to say is that I believe, I'm a strong believer of deliberative democracy. I believe in deliberative processes. We need to be deliberative. Obviously, there is a problem of polarization in any sort of collective groups. Polarization is by definition the essence of any sort of collective body. You cannot have by definition a group that everybody would agree in anything. What you have to do is to be more deliberative, which means that you have to be ready to change your mind if there are some strong reasonable arguments in order to be able to change your view. And I think this is completely important. You just take the example of the jury system in the United States. You have 13 people and they have to reach unanimity. Unless they reach unanimity, they never leave the room. Why? They do not start. The starting point is not the same option about everything, but you need to have the open mind, the deliberative mode, in order to be able to reach a decision. And we have to agree on the basics. And the basics is, of course, liberal democracy. In liberal democracy, I think it's a contradiction in terms. You cannot have a democracy which is illiberate, but we also need to see that the power of a body like the European Union lies essentially with its diversity. We need to see diversity as an enriching factor. I like to say that Europe is more like a salad bowl instead of a melting pot where every nation comes in and we have some sort of a prototype of European nation. We do not have this, but we have a salad bowl, and each of the ingredients adds up to a more sophisticated and more enriching approach to any sort of decision-making. This is how I would like to envisage Europe, and I think this is the idea. And I cannot obviously reach the wisdom of Martin Schulz in political terms, but I could add some good quality Greek ancient philosophy and literature by saying that the whole is always larger than its constituent, the sum of its constituent parts, Aristotle. So if you have the parts and eventually you make it a single vehicle, this is much bigger than the sum of all its constituent parts.
Excellent, thank you. Well, another question. This time for you, Minister, again. I mean, you mentioned Greek philosophy. Don't worry, I'm not going to go off on a treatise on the importance of Greek philosophy. But it does interest me that as we look around Europe at the moment, and I look from the other side of the channel, where we're saving the embarrassment of having to deal with Nigel Farage, whose name didn't come up, which is fantastic. We look at a number of countries suffering unusual upheaval, unusual instability in their politics. Germany, France, two good examples. At the very core of Europe, and normally the directors, the drivers of the European project. Greece isn't like that at the moment. Greece is an oasis, if you like, of stability. So, on the one hand, Greece has a part to play because you have that stability. But what I wondered is, do you think there's something that Greece can bring to the table because it's Greece? Something that, because of the way Greece works, Greece's history, Greece's role, Greece's geographical position, there's a contribution that you, as a foreign minister, or the Greek diplomatic corps can make in the European context?
I don't want to just set forth any sort of heresy in our discussion, but I would say that, ironically, one of the major reasons why we are in a state of stability today is because we survived the financial crisis that we suffered for 10 years. It's as simple as this. Because, first of all, we had to actually address the issue of populism. We saw, we tried, we tested populism in our political life, and we saw that this was a total illusion. It was very hard for us, and we had a harsh, very harsh treatment, which on some occasion was proved to be absolutely inadequate and inhumane. But the truth is that in spite of all the econometrics of the financial crisis, the truth is that we survived this, and now we consider ourselves to be very strong, very resilient, very experienced. And this is why I think we are stable, because Greek people, and I trust Greek people now know that populism is not the answer to any question. And this is, for me, one important political contribution that we can just set forth within a European context. The second is that Greece, because of geography, because of geopolitics, because of history, can be a bridge. And I like to say that bridges is the essential tool for improvement and for sustainability. Greece can be the bridge between the north and the south, between the east and the west, and we can really perform this role very well, I can reassure you. Now, as you probably know, we're going to serve for a couple of years at the Security Council as a non-permanent member. We're very much looking forward to work this. We had an outstanding performance in the election process. We had something like 98% positive vote during our election. This is a huge burden, a huge political burden, but truly, actually, sincerely, I think we can have some added value, exactly because we can be the bridge of nations and the bridge of countries. And as Martin Schulz mentioned, what we really need now is governments and states and people who can produce convergences and are not divergent by attitude.
Excellent. Martin, I just wanted to give you a brief opportunity to comment on that point, Greece's role in the resolution of these issues that we're seeing in Europe.
Difficult to add something.
Yeah.
I think the minister covered the necessary answer. Only one thing. The treatment during the crisis of the country, of the government of Greece, was very, very unfair. And that was a damage to the European spirit. And the criticism that the political actions in Brussels transform itself in experiences of citizens. And it's for me unforgettable. When I visited, I was not yet president of the European Parliament, I was chairman of the Socialist Group in the European Parliament, and we were heavily fighting against the so-called Troika, which was perceived in Greece as a kind of Brussels dictatorship. And then I came here to, no, I'm not here to Thessaloniki, to Athens, and I met in Athens people who used to work in the banking sector. Normally people with a decent salary and a more or less middle class setting. And then people told me that they 45 years paid for their pensions. And now already the pensions were cut to 60%, and the European Union is asking to reduce it for even 10% more. That was the message of the European Union to destroy my life. In Brussels are people earning 20,000 euros a month, deciding that I should cut my pension of 3,000 euros already to 1,500 by more than 150 euros. This is a kind of, that was for me an experience as a social democrat. You can imagine I was really ashamed. Why I tell that story? Because I'm admiring the country. After all this suffering, after all these sacrifices made by ordinary citizens here in the country, that the Greeks didn't leave the European Union, didn't step away from the idea that Europe is a meaningful project, even in the interest of the country. I must admit I admire the country, and if you allow, as a social democrat, I'm a social democrat, I must add, I know that Nea Demokratia is ruling the country with the absolute majority, but a lot of the profits of the Mitsotakis government is a result of the sacrifices made by the previous governments, and I must recognize that even Mitsotakis recognizes this officially in some of his speeches, which is not transforming him in an acceptable socialist, but at least in an acceptable prime minister.
Excellent. Well, I think on that relatively positive note, in the context of some of the dreadful conversations we've been having, we should close off this conversation. You've both been superb. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.